Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 3 of Crafting for Profit Live. This is our new video podcast. If you are joining us for the first time, we are so excited to have you guys here today. Today's topic is craft fair secrets for selling success. That was a lot of alliteration. So we're going to be talking all about craft fairs with our special guest today, which I'll get to in a moment. But before I do that, we are going to be talking all about craft fairs. And so if you have any questions about craft fairs and you're watching this on the YouTube live, please drop those in the comments. That way we can get to those in the episode. If you have other questions, you can drop them there as well, but we probably won't touch on them this time. But you can also find below the video, there is a link to ask us questions. Or if you're listening on the podcast, there will be a link where you can ask us questions in a form. So if you have other questions about running a small crafty business, you can use that form and we should be able to address your questions sometime in a future episode. So my name is Corey George. I am the blogger and YouTuber behind Hey Let's Make Stuff. I am a crafty machine person. So I've got Cricut machines, I've got sublimation printers, lasers, all sorts of crafting tech. And I write about them on my blog and I talk about them on my YouTube channel. I'm going to introduce my co-host, Angie Holden.
So I'm basically the same. All the crafting machines, all the crafting tech, I love it all, and have a YouTube channel and a blog. And I did want to remind you to be sure to rate and review the podcast or like our YouTube video, either way. And if you have friends that might be thinking about doing a craft fair or need these craft fair secrets, be sure to share the show with them. And now we're going to let Crystal Summers with Life Love Creations introduce herself.
Hi, guys. I'm Crystal. I'm from Life Love Creations. I live here in Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C. I have 2 kids and a husband. I started Life Love Creations in 2020. I was laid off the week of my 35th birthday, right in the midst of the world shutting down. So like many others, I found myself at home with 2 kids and no idea what to do. So I started making Play-Doh with my daughter, who was 4 at the time. And it really just evolved into a full-blown sensory Play-Doh kit business. And it kind of remained that way for a few years until Corey convinced me to invest in a laser craft machine. And since then, my products have evolved and changed. It's still largely, my business is still largely geared toward families and kids, but I do a little bit of everything these days. Most of the Play-Doh that I make now is for custom orders and party favors or local craft markets, which we're talking about today. So my sensory Play-Doh kits are actually still the largest seller at craft fairs and markets, which is interesting, seeing as it's not typically what I sell the most of on my website. When I'm not crafting, you can usually find me working on a DIY home renovation project with my husband, reading a book with these ladies sometimes, and hanging out with family and friends. So.
Awesome. We are so glad to have you here. This is really exciting. For those of you who don't know, Crystal also works behind the scenes with both me and Angie. You may have seen her name if you have, excuse me, if you have joined any of our bigger camps. So Crystal is sort of our right-hand gal. And so she does that. And then on the side runs her little business, which I think is really, I think it's a lot of people here where it's like you have a full-time job or a part-time job and then you have sort of a side hustle. So Crystal can probably speak to that a little bit. So let's start with our questions. So we sort of talked a little bit about how you started. I feel like a lot of people started during COVID because I feel like we were all stuck at home, a lot of us with little kids, and it was just something to do. But do you have any tips now that you've done a lot of markets and craft fairs for prepping for your first craft fair?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is to decide, first of all, how you want your display to look and how you want to basically how you want to display your products. I would say to make sure to set it up before the event. I'll say that's, I think, the biggest thing that I learned in doing my first markets and even like the first couple. And to this day, I still change it up from time to time. But you can set your display up anywhere, take all of your items, take your tables, take whatever you're going to have, set it up in your garage, your house, wherever you have the space. Because what I've found is that even if you think it's it's going to look one way in your mind. You'll set it up and you'll inevitably change it a bunch of times. That's kind of like the biggest thing I would say when you're actually getting ready to attend your first market. Um, I would also say that you need to double check what you need to bring to said markets. Being prepared. Most markets require certain things, such as your own table, a tent if it's an outdoor market. A lot of the markets that I do are actually outdoors, which I know is a little bit different than a lot of craft fairs and shows, which are indoors. So for markets that I do, a lot of times they require us to bring our own tent. We also have to bring tent weights because you don't want your tent taking off and taking somebody out who's just trying to have a lovely day shopping at the market. um, Basically just to be really clear on what's expected of you, and typically your event coordinator, the person putting it together, will let you know. But it's sometimes, like, I've done indoor markets where they're like, we provide you a table so you don't have to bring a table. And then I've done others where they're like, well, you have a 10 by 10 space and you can do whatever you want. So then I'm bringing one table, two tables, whatever fits that space. So I think just being clear, understanding where you're setting up, what you have access to, especially if you need something like power, if you are going to like try to personalize on site or anything like that. The other thing I would say is to prep for the elements, especially if you're outside. The rain, wind, cold, all of it, even hot. I mean, just making sure you have lots of water. The heat will take, I mean, I've seen people like not do well at an outdoor event. Just making sure you have water. A big one for me is making sure that I actually pack snacks. I know it's not ever top of mind for me, but especially on those busy craft fair days where you're just constant and maybe you can't go grab something to eat, or you don't have somebody to man your booth for you while you're going to grab a snack or what have you. So just making sure it's like those like little unexpected things that, I mean, you're going to bring your products, you're going to bring those things, but there are all these other like little things that you should think about.
I
I
think that's
also
what
like displays that have, like, some height to them. Like,
Mhm.
those always catch my eye, like, instead of it being flat on the table, like, something to raise things up, something to add some height, get some of the products off the table. I always kinda like that.
Yeah, I feel like I know the last 2 craft fairs that I did. So I actually did one this last summer, which was I hadn't done one in a while, and I live here in the Pacific Northwest, and it was like 95 degrees. And so we were so stinking hot because it was like the hottest day of the year. And I remember just thinking like I did not bring nearly enough water, I mean everybody was really hot. So that was that. And then the craft fair that I did before this is when I was still living in California, and it snowed, which it literally, I'd never seen it snow where we lived. And of course, it snowed on the day when I had an outdoor craft fair. And so I feel like my two extremes are like, okay, now I really need to prep if I'm going to be doing a craft fair because the weather can be like such a huge determining factor of how you're actually going to feel during the whole event.
So do you also kind of, like, take into account, like, how long your setup's gonna take? Like, that practice setup, it feels like that would be a good time to say, like, "This is how long it's gonna take me," because I know for me, I'm always, like, in a time crunch of, like, "Am I gonna get this done?"
Oh, hold on, Crystal, we can't hear you.
I was
There we go.
muted. Sorry. Um, I think most markets, they will give you, I think, they'll be like, you can come an hour early or, sometimes 2 hours early. Over the years since starting doing this, the first couple markets I actually did with my friend Jess because we sell very like products that complement each other. And it also is a really nice way to kind of break into it, especially when you're really nervous to do something alone. And it took us a while to set up, especially those first couple, especially fumbling with tent, popping open tables, getting the tablecloths on, making sure stuff isn't falling off, like making sure if a gust of wind comes or something. So we would show up really early for those, maybe the full hour. Now it's kind of the same way I am in the airport. I want to get in like 20 minutes before, and I just want to like start. Like I don't want to wait around, but I've got it down now. So I think it's just with time and practice and just like that repetition, it gets quicker.
I think that makes sense, and I think it also makes sense, like, again, if you're, like, outside versus inside, it's gonna take you probably longer to set up if your stuff's outside because you do have that tent, you've got, you may have things like table weights, and there's things that, you might not need necessarily if you're inside, so if you've done only inside craft fairs and you're like, "I'm gonna do my first outside one," like, give yourself some extra time.
Definitely.
All right, so can you share some strategies for choosing the right craft fair? Like, first time I'm looking for a craft fair, where do I look and how do I choose?
Sure. So first, I mean, I found a lot of my first ones basically word of mouth. Again, it was the height of the pandemic, so outdoor markets were like the thing. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on inside. I had been to a couple markets as a just as a consumer, as somebody there to shop to see some of my favorite vendors, and I just started thinking, can I do this? Can I, so I've kind of emailed whoever was in charge and started getting involved that way. So I think really just, you might have to put yourself out there and reach out to somebody. And I think most people are willing, especially if you have a vendor that when you go and shop and you're just like, hey, how did you get started with this? Like, is there space for me? Could I sign up? There's a market. The very first one that I ever did was actually a farmer's market. It's a farmers and artisans market. So they're weekly, basically year round. So it was a lot of opportunities just to come almost like any time that you wanted. So that was one I was like, how do you get to do this? So
We have a Facebook group for our neighborhood, and the crafters are really big in the Facebook group, and so we have one for our community, but every time there's one that's sort of locally as well, a lot of times people will post there, and that's another great resource for finding different craft fairs around.
I think also, like, I know I'm pretty active on social media, and even before I had my small business, people are out there sharing all the time. They're sharing what they're doing on the weekends, the small shops that you follow are posting. And so I think just kind of finding out that way also. I would also say one of the biggest things is your budget. Because I've done markets and craft fairs. I've done ones that are free because they're just like a really small local, and the foot traffic isn't as much, but you're also not paying, as much. And then there are ones that are hundreds of dollars. And, for somebody just starting out, that might not be worth it to you. So I think really understanding, the cost to be a part of the event, and then trying to think about, is it worth it? How much are you going to make? That cost analysis. And then the other thing that I do want to put out there about that is that for me personally, and I've had a discussion, everybody's business goals and why they do their business is different. And obviously at the end of the day, we want to have a profitable business. I have had markets where I walked away and I was like, that wasn't the best. Like, I didn't make very much money. Oh, I don't know. Like, I just broke even with, between the fee to, sign up, and then, my time being there, because you're taking time away from your family or, your extracurriculars or whatever you want to do. But then I would have somebody reach out to me a week later, a month later, and be like, oh, hey, I met you at that market. Can you do X, Y, and Z? Or can I place a bulk order? Or can I place a custom order? And so for me, it's like that stuff, while it might not be that day, you're seeing that return on investment. I think down the road, like, you could see it. You're making those connections and people are going to be like, oh, I saw you at that thing and I wasn't ready to buy that item that day, but now maybe I am.
I think it goes to show excuse me. I think it goes to show how important it is then to have, like, contact you methods, business cards, and email list, all those things, which we can talk about a little bit more, but I feel like,
Mhm.
I have so many business cards from vendors from over the years, and every once in a while, I will reach back out to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this particular thing. Do you have something that'll work?"
And I think even, and both of us have a goal today. I think even non-traditional things that aren't labeled as a craft fair, like our town does something they call First Fridays, and they allow people just to put a table on the sidewalk downtown, and people just kind of walk around and just browse things. So it's not technically labeled a craft fair, but it's definitely some place where you could get that word of mouth out there.
Yeah, in Sacramento, we had Second Saturdays. All the galleries were open, and then a lot of people were able to, like, set up their own little, booths and things. It was really great. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's like a thing, like, just pulls the community together, plus, like, you can maybe make some crafty friends along the way.
Another thing too that I just thought of is also in California, but another place I lived, we had the eggplant festival. So it was like all things eggplant, which is hilarious because it's like the one thing I really don't like when it comes to vegetables. But I mean, there was all sorts of eggplant themed things, and then there was like a huge craft fair that went along with it. So there's things like that that may not seem like it's a craft fair, like a farmer's market or something like that, but that also invite people who sell, crafty stuff to sell there as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think also the community, like you mentioned, you touched on the community aspect. I would, you know, if you can attend, like I had done before, if you can attend these events and kind of see what kind of people they bring in, is this your person? Are these people that you think are going to be interested in your products? And also just, what's the traffic like? Again, it's so for me, craft fairs are so much more than just selling the product, but I truly think it's like about generating this community and meeting people and networking, and
Yeah.
it's just a really great way to do that.
I also think attending a craft fair before you sell there is a good idea in that you can also see what other types of products are being sold. So if you go and there's like 10 soap vendors and you make custom soap, maybe that's not the best place because it's really saturated. But maybe there's, 10 soap vendors and you make sublimation mugs. So there's like a space for it and nobody else is making it. So I really feel like that also can give you a good insight into like how your products might do in comparison to other people's products.
I do know too. So there's a local market. They do what they call market days, and they do them a couple of per season, and they've been really great to work with. But they also they will be like, we only allow 2 candle vendors per event or what have you, because they don't want, for them and for us, I mean, because then we're not, as a vendor, you're not going to want to come back if it's just totally saturated. So I think also finding a reputable like an event coordinator, or whoever's hosting the event, and they really put this time and effort and energy into what they're creating, and I think that really helps too.
Yeah, and if you're doing somebody who has like kind of that reputation of doing a good job, you know that they're probably also going to do things like advertise and that sort of thing. My mom does craft fairs and she did one recently and she's like, I had to do like everything. Like there was just almost nothing on the back end. Excuse me. And she'd already signed up for it. So it was like one of those things where she's like, well, I'm going to do it. But like she got there and it hadn't been advertised very well, almost nobody knew about it. So I think having those kind of more reputable sales that happen year after year or season after season is definitely where it's a good place to start if you don't have like a big, huge list or something that you can promote to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like you could even go back and see, did they promote last year? And you will kind of know what they're going to do this year for promotion. I think the ones that promote the most, or at least promote themselves as much as possible, definitely are going to have the most foot traffic.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been to ones too, like the one I'm talking about, where they provide the graphics, they provide all the things that you need, and it just makes everything so much easier, and you can tell because you can see the people, all the different vendors sharing, and so you could look back essentially on social media and just see. I will say though, I've been kind of in that situation your mom was in, Corey, and the market wasn't really great. And so I don't, you also, it's not for me next time. You have to live and learn and you have to try new things. And, not every market is going to be a huge success, but
All right, so let's keep talking about markets, and we're going to get to Angie and my favorite topics here. Are there any legal, and when I say favorite, I mean not favorite, legal or logistical considerations that you should be aware of, when participating in a craft fair?
I'm going to start out the same way that you guys always start out. I am by no means a legal expert. I'm not a lawyer. Go talk to your lawyer. Go talk to your local, you know, jurisdiction or whatever. I would say though, again, it's making sure you're working with a reputable event coordinator. I personally, the events that I have done, they have not required me to hold my own business insurance, but I am of good faith believing that they do, that they have that part handled. I do have friends who have participated in markets, and I do know that they have had to carry their own business insurance. So I think that that is something to consider. Um, The biggest thing I've been required to provide, or the most common thing, is my tax ID. That's to ensure that I remit the sales tax on any purchases that I get at that market. So, first and foremost, you'd probably want to make sure that you have that, especially before you attend or, vend at a market. So that's a big one.
Yeah,
I
I've
think
definitely seen, I live in Tennessee. I've definitely seen Tennessee people walking around a craft fair and they ask for the ID, ask how you're collecting, ask how you're emitting, that like all that information. So I've like that's top for me.
Yeah, I feel like most states, there might be 1 or 2 states, but I feel like almost all states require you to collect sales tax on the jurisdiction in which you're selling. So if you're selling in Washington, where I am, I have to collect sales tax on all Washington purchases, which means if I'm holding a craft fair in Washington, they're all Washington purchases. Doesn't matter if the person lives out of state, I'm collecting it because I'm selling it to somebody in Washington. And so you definitely want to make sure that you are collecting and remitting that sales tax. We say this all the time because we don't want you to get into legal hot water. There's
Yeah.
also, we should mention too, there might be other legal concerns when it comes to the types of products that you're selling. I don't know if you've run across this with Play-Doh at all, but I know that if you're going to be selling food, you probably need a cottage food license in a lot of places. There may be different restrictions or things if you are selling to children or to babies, especially skincare, those sorts of things. You want to look into all of that first.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think you mentioned logistical considerations too. And just to kind of touch, we covered that before, but you do want to just make sure, and this is also illegal. I know it's a legal thing is why we do it, but tent weights, making sure that you really truly have the proper stuff that you're supposed to, because that can be a really big deal if you don't
Yeah.
and somebody
If
were to
you
get hurt.
If you think also about selling without a tent, we sold on that really hot day last summer. We had a tent, but there was vendors that didn't have tents, and like nobody wanted to be in the booth, like into the area. I guess it's not even really a booth in
Yeah.
the area where somebody was selling because the sun was beating down. People were coming into our tents to cool off, and so it was one of those things where it was like, you really want to take those weather things into consideration because it can actually affect your sales.
Yeah, I've been at ones before that where it was cold and the vendor had a tent and kind of put the sides up and had a little heater. Those were the tents that were full.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Crystal, you mentioned, and I think this is super unique for you. You mentioned like networking with other vendors and organizers, and I really love the way you do that. So, kind of talk about those connections and how you made those and how like you work together.
Sure. So some of my closest friends and most consistent customers are people that I met actually at markets, which is just, it kind of blows my mind today. But so, like I mentioned before, the events that I typically vend at will have you promote a lot beforehand, or they'll just ask like, can you please post 3 times, or however many times leading up to the event. And so I am able to connect with other vendors that way. So prior to me, like before my first or even my second or even third market, I could kind of start to see, okay, here's the vendor list. And then as people shared, I would engage with them and like, oh, I'll be there too. And, it was just really fun. I kind of had a mental list of people that I had connected with online on social media that I wanted to meet in person. So if I had a second, I would pop over and be like, hey, I'm Crystal. And like, some of us still are like, oh, and they'll be like, oh, Life Love Creations. Like, 'cause, we don't have real names to each other. But, over time, you really just develop those relationships. And I think, then you're promoting each other in just like this more like natural and authentic way, because you've like made an actual connection out in the real world. I don't know. It's pretty awesome. It really truly, like, that's the best part of events for me, is just seeing all the vendors that I don't usually get to see because we're all at home working our butts off to get to the market.
I think it's really fun also. I mean, it's just a great way to meet other creative people. Um, I was had a craft fair that my mom was doing over the winter, and the person next to her was selling stuff that if I had a booth at that fair, I probably would have been selling similar things. Really cute laser cut stuff. I mean, just It was very cute. And so she and I, like, we got each other's numbers because I was like, not only is this like somebody I could connect with on a business sense, I was like, but we could be friends, which is nice. So I feel like they're just finding other people who are also crafty, who might also, have the same sort of things that they like to do that you do. It's just a really nice place to meet people in your community.
Yeah, we've done, we have, like, once we've kind of put faces to names, or, two people will have this idea and be like, oh, hey, let's get together for like a maker's afternoon. And we've like made these whole like local Maryland maker community events just from like two people meeting at a market. Or, we reach out, whether it's like through Instagram or in person, to, chat and connect and brainstorm. And we have a lot of the same struggles, like, with all the things and business and life. And so we connect that way. And it's just been that's for me, that's again, like, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but that's my favorite part of all of the craft fair
I
stuff.
think that is a huge difference between selling online and selling locally. Like, you really create those relationships that are a lot harder to create when you're selling on Etsy or in your own shop. I mean, I have, a shop where I sell digital files. Do I know the people who buy all my digital files? No. Some of you are here and I love you, but generally, I'm not having a personal connection with the people who are buying from my shop. And I just love a good craft fair for making those personal connections. All right. So
Uh,
this is probably, oh, sorry.
Go
Go ahead,
ahead.
Jean.
Oh, I was going to say that those connections with your customers even help you like develop that customer avatar we're so passionate about, of like who your ideal customer is. And then it also helps you to like develop new products. I feel like talking to people and asking them what they're looking for, what are the things you're buying at this craft fair, like I feel like that helps as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this is probably my favorite topic because it's technically like branding in person. And I love talking about branding. So how do you make yourself stand out at a craft fair or market?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost is making your display stand out. Angie mentioned it a little bit earlier, but really making sure you have different heights and things are elevated. Making your display like colorful. Just making sure that you show off your products. I like to kind of see what others are doing to get ideas. Not to take their ideas necessarily, but you get a lot of good ideas just wandering around the markets. I would say that's one thing to probably also look for if you're thinking about getting into doing markets, is to see how people are displaying their products. Because if you walk up and you just see everything just like all at one level on a table, it's like, what am I looking at here? So I think that's um, a good way to stand out, is just to make sure that your products look good and are displayed well. Since I have products that are geared towards kids, I typically, if the weather permits, will bring a hands-on activity. For many years, my kids have had this like IKEA sensory play bin table, and it's lightweight. So I pick it up and bring it with me, and I can pop it outside the tent. And so that brings kids over to come and hang out and engage and play and make a mess in the bin. But then that brings the parents over, and then, we're all chatting, and it just starts kind of that natural conversation. And I've seen people do giveaways where they have like the spinny wheel and they'll give away like candy or a discount or a little freebie. I also have crafty friends who have like a bubblegum machine dispenser, and you pay, I think she does, where like you pay $10 and you get a coin and you get a mystery item. And it's like, it's a really good, it's a good item, but people like fun things, right? And people want to come, they want to engage. That's why they're there.
At the last craft fair that I did, I had a bin of free craft supplies. So as a blogger, as a YouTuber, I get sent stuff from companies, and sometimes I ask for it, and sometimes it just shows up on my doorstep. And it's a weird life, but there's some stuff I'm just never going to use because I feel like my business is very branded. I know exactly what I make. I'm never going to use purple iron on vinyl. I'm just not. Sorry, purple people. I'm just not going to use it. So things like that. I just put a free bin. Maybe it's supplies you're not using anymore. Maybe you're just trying to clear out your craft room. But I had so many people come into my booth because I had a free, or you could have a misfits bin, like under $5 or something like that, where it's like just those things to kind of hook people and get them to come into your bin or come into your booth and start that natural conversation that Crystal was talking about.
And we've talked about branding, I don't know how many times, but the same color palette. So buy your tablecloths in the same color palette, your displays in the same color palette. If your items are within that color palette or at least close to it, everything kind of works together. Everything fits together and it's very appealing to the eye. Like people are drawn in at that point when they see your bright, colorful booth with all of the same color patterns, or your farmhouse style booth with all that white, black, gray, wood tones. And then they're drawn in because that's their style. They're more likely to buy, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we are such visual creatures, and Angie and I sort of harp on this all the time, but like we live in a visual world, so you got to make pretty stuff. Nobody wants to go into a booth that feels like a junk bin, right? Nobody wants to just have to go sifting through stuff to figure out what they want to buy. They want, it to be clear and bright and know this, okay, this is my type of stuff right in front of me. I had people who came into my booth, took one look and was like, this is not for me. And they walked away, and that's totally fine. But I have people who walk into my booth and then they're like, oh my gosh, this is like totally my style. And that's like the real connection that you can make. It's super exciting.
Yeah. Those are your people. That's what I always say. Those are my people. And the people that come in and walk out, I'm like, that's okay. It's not my people. They're somebody else's. I would also say, I think the biggest thing is, yes, your booth is going to bring people in, the colors, things like that. But I think you also should be warm and welcoming to people who are coming to your booth. Just being yourself, smiling, interacting. One of my biggest things, I always personally feel awkward walking into a booth if somebody's sitting. I don't know. It's something like I don't want to walk in and like look down at the person selling. So while I typically always bring a chair, especially if there's like slow moments or I'm eating a snack or just need a break, but I will 99% of the time be standing when I'm working a booth because I want to be at that eye level. I want to be able to interact and I don't know. I just feel like it's more engaging. It's more natural. There's just something about I don't want to be sitting down looking up at somebody and vice versa.
When I went to a different craft fair a while back, this person had like 3 chairs in their booth for other people to sit down and chat with them, which I thought was kind of fun. Like their products were kind of small. I think she was making earrings out of like Coke cans and stuff. So her products were small. So she had quite a bit of space in her booth. And so she just brought out some chairs and, take a load off, sit down, have a chat, maybe get something to drink in your booth, like just have some bottled water or something. And it's another way to get people to connect.
Yeah, I think that's actually I love that idea. Like, come hang out with me.
Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, obviously there's all different reasons that somebody would be sitting. I'm not saying don't sit. Everybody has different abilities and things like that. But I love that idea to, if you are sitting, have a chair or move your chair. I don't know, move it kind of toward the front, like so you're not hiding back behind your products. It just feels more welcoming to me.
I've also seen people personalize on site, and I feel like that is a huge like draw for people. Like Christmas ornaments where I can get my kids' names on them right on site. I feel like that just I'm there. I bought those Christmas ornaments. I don't know how many times. So maybe you have like the Glowforge Plus or the Pro at home to actually cut the ornaments out because that's more of like the production machine. But you can take something like the Glowforge Aura, the new Glowforge Spark if you've not seen it. And if you have electricity, a way to like, I would recommend filtering it. But if you have all that there at the craft fair, then you can personalize that ornament on site, add those names, and get that extra value add that, like, for me, I'm willing to pay the extra.
I feel like that's such a good idea because as somebody whose name is not spelled the same way Corey is generally, I mean, there's like 10 ways to spell my name. I never found my name on stuff as a kid. It's like, and one of the reasons I got so crafty was because I could start to personalize stuff for myself. And I do feel like, especially those 2 new Glowforge machines, that Aura and that Spark, because they're lower wattage, they don't require, nearly the space. You can easily pick them up and move them around. You could totally bring one to a craft fair and start that personalization, which I think draws so many people in, especially if you have a name like me that is not, going to be found, on a rack at a souvenir shop or something. I think that's such a fun idea.
And so we have added just a note, the Glowforge Spark right now, like I said, it's brand new and it is on pre-sale right now for like $5.99. And this is like a very low price for that small laser. So we did add in the show notes, YouTube description. And if you're watching on YouTube, we're added a little thing across the bottom with a link as well as a QR code where you can head to the Glowforge website, check out all their items. And if you're interested in this bark, I would encourage you. What is the date that the pre-sale ends, Corey?
April
Like April
4th. Yeah, it's coming up. April 4th,
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah. So be sure, if you like thinking like I want the spark, be sure to research it before then is what I would recommend.
Yeah. And after that, it's only going to be $6.99, which is still a much lower priced laser. Again, this is a small craft hobby laser, so it's not going to be able to do the production that you would need for, a big business running. Crystal makes a lot of things using her Glow. You have a Glowforge Basic, which they don't actually have anymore, but if you have a Glowforge Plus or a Glowforge Pro, you can make a bunch of stuff at home, and then you can use that smaller machine to personalize it, which is awesome.
Okay, so now let's get into some common mistakes crafters make when they participate in craft fairs. So what mistakes have you seen, Crystal?
I think the biggest mistake I've seen is actually one that I made for a while on my own, was not having clear product pricing. So for a while, I was like, I don't know, I think I thought that, it would start a conversation more if people had to ask, oh, how much is this? And it's like, well, I think some people feel awkward, like being like, how much is this? Because they just want to be like, oh, I'll take this and then pretend like, oh, it's, that's fine. I'll pay for it. So I think having clear product pricing, for me personally, I just have one price sheet and it's a printout. I put it in just in like a photo frame because my prices change, the items change, things like that. It evolves. And people will still ask, even if you have a sign, but that's okay because you can then say, oh, here's the sign, the pricing's over here. But I think it's just better to eliminate a little bit of that awkwardness and just, being clear and upfront of these are my prices. And there's also like no wavering and things like that.
I'm the person that doesn't want to ask. So if your prices aren't clear, I'm just going to walk away awkwardly.
I'm the same exact way. I'm like, I don't want to. I mean, like, I'm pretty introverted. The fact that I'm always, out here on YouTube and our podcast and everything doesn't show that, like, it takes a lot for me to actually start a conversation with a stranger, and it's even worse if it's about money. So I definitely think having that pricing sheet or having your stuff individually priced is the way to go.
Definitely. I think the other thing is, and we've touched on it, is just branding. And, you all mentioned having items that are, color coordinated and things like that. And, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be over the top. A lot of us, myself included, are just doing this kind of as a side business. So I don't have a fully branded, built out booth with, custom colors and everything matching. But I do have some colorful tablecloths and I'll throw up seasonal decor. If I'm doing holiday market, I'll have some Christmas, like little Christmas trees to, put things on. And I think just, you don't have to make it full blown, but just having consistency and kind of the look and the feel from time to time. And, again, it draws people in.
Even like a QR code to your website. Say if like someone's asking about something and you're like, and you're not personalizing on site and you're like, I can personalize that. They can scan the QR code and like shop right there. Like get them while they're in the booth if you can. Because I feel like they walk away, they forget we're going to make that order. The kids get busy, they don't think about it for 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, I also think one other thing that I just thought of too is a lot of what I do, or a lot of the transactions nowadays are digital. Like we're, taking payments online and things. But I think making sure that you have enough money and change, because there are people who just come and they have cash. And most people nowadays have cards too. But a lot of people will be like, oh, can I just give you cash? And you don't want to say no because they're giving you money. So you want to make sure that you have the right change.
I think that really depends on your audience as well, right? So if you're doing a craft fair at a retirement home, those people are probably more likely to have cash than they are to have, Square or Venmo, right? Like my grandma does not have Venmo. But it's one of those things too, where it might also be your audience. So I went to a huge craft fair down by Seattle, and it was pretty much all digital. I think they were like, you have to have some kind of digital thing, but it was also young and hip and felt very like modern. It didn't feel like a lot of people were just walking around with cash. And so I think they said at the outset, you have to have like a way to pay digitally.
So we're like already on this subject. So do we want to talk about what the best way to take payments is?
Sure. Yeah, so I use Square for all of my events. I think, I mean, it makes it so easy. I had a market, I think sometime last year, where a woman came up and she was like, "Can I do Apple Pay? Can I just tap your phone?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, I don't know, because I have the little reader and you have to stick the card in or tap it. And she's like, no, I can tap your phone. And I was like, okay. And she did. And sure enough, Square and Apple Pay, there was some sort of magic. And so I think, I mean, for me personally, it keeps everything in one, um, it keeps everything in one place. I can pull a report of how much I sold that day. Also very helpful for remitting those taxes that we need to do so that you are, staying on the legal side of things. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love Square. I use it. I think people have come to expect it. Honestly, at most events, they'll be like, "Oh, do you take card? Do you have a way?" And I do. So,
Yep. So I put Crystal's Square referral link in the description or the podcast notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, I have the QR code wherever I can't point on YouTube, as well as the link in the thing below in the uh, typed below. And so with that, you get free processing up to $1,000 if you use that link. So if you're interested in trying Square, and I will say, so my son also is like starting a side hustle, and we set up Square, and it was extremely easy to set up. You don't have to have like hardware or anything anymore, so you can just like literally just use your phone. Extremely easy to set up. I was like super impressed.
Yeah, there you can also, what I did because I didn't have Square the last time I did a craft fair, because I don't do them very often anymore, and I didn't necessarily want to go through the whole process of setting it up. I just had like 4 QR codes for all my different payments. So it was like, here's my Venmo QR code and PayPal and Cash App. And so that worked, but again, it went to all the different, places. So it was a little harder to keep track of what I'd sold. Whereas if you're using something like Square, it's like more aggregated into one place or whatever.
Okay, so we have one more question we're going to answer, and then we're going to take some questions from the chat if you're joining us live on YouTube. So, those last minute questions, start typing them. But we're going to talk about some effective ways to follow up with customers after the craft fair ends to get that repeat business. And I'm just going to like open it up, but of course, I'm passionate about email.
do you want to talk about email then? I
I
feel like
can.
sure.
I would say number one, I would recommend starting an email list for your business. So you can use like Convert. We realized ConvertKit was one that has up to 1,000 subscribers for free. You can have a little QR code at your booth, get them to sign up. You do want to get them to sign up. I would not recommend, if you're going to have them write down their email address, it gets a little iffy. Having them sign up and actually opt in with like a QR code on their phone is going to be much better. Like that's the legal way to do it, is have them actually opt in with their email address on a website. So I definitely say QR code, have them opt in, and then follow up after that craft fair. Tell them about sales, tell them about your new products, send the emails to your list.
It's another
I
great way to send them a follow-up coupon as well. Like, thanks for coming to the craft fair. Here's 10% off your next purchase. Here's my website.
I think you can actually, I haven't done it, but I think you can actually set up, I think you can collect emails in Square. So my very first, don't quote me on this, but I think because my very first website before I switched over to Shopify was built through Square, and I was able to send emails to customers through it. So there has to be a way I'm assuming, and I can look this up later if we need to go back, but there should be a way to, collect email addresses through it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So what are some other ways that you follow up with customers?
So social media, I think, is kind of queen when it comes to local craft fairs and events. I mean, those are your local people in your community. You'll see people following you that day, especially if you have, I do, again, talking about going back to branding, is I will have, my at, Life Love Creations so that people can follow me. Also, it's on my business cards. But people will, follow, or they'll tag me in a story. They'll post a picture of their child playing with my product. So then it's just a really nice way to like engage with them and just say thanks for sharing and, going back and forth. Um, And I think it's just that's kind of how you build your community, especially locally.
All right, are we ready for some questions here? What is the best way to do local consumer research? Also, what do you do with products you don't sell? So, two good questions in that one, I feel like.
Sure. You want me to answer?
You go.
Okay. Yeah, so I actually chatted about this on our Crafting for Profit camp in my session. So, consumer research, I think the best way to do it, honestly, is at craft fairs. You're going to see your people, you're going to be able to engage with them, you're going to see them walk into your booth, and you'll see how they interact with your products. You'll see what they're drawn to. People will ask, "Oh, do you have this?" Or "I see that you have this, but do you have it in this color?" And it's like, "Oh no, I didn't think about that, but I could do that." So I think that's just a good way.
And then I feel like
Oh,
products that don't sell, you can save them for your next craft fair. You could do like flash sales on your social. I think that would be a good idea. Like listing them on a website, different things like that. But like a flash sale in your social would be a great way to get rid of those, I feel like.
I actually do story sales usually after a market because a lot of my Play-Doh is, while it's sealed and if it's a Play-Doh item and it has kind of a shelf life or it's a seasonal item like a winter themed kit, after a market, I'll put them up on my stories and do essentially a story flash sale. And then a lot of those people are the non-local people. So it gives them the chance if I have the product, it's ready to ship and it gets it out. And it also, gets people their products that they want.
You could also do that, like, if you had a small Facebook group for your business as well, you could do a sale within your Facebook group after a market with the same thing.
Okay, we have gotten several questions on how many of each item do you figure on? Like, is there a way to figure that out? Is there, a way to like determine that?
Gosh, that's such a hard one. I think
It's a
that's
hard one.
so unique. I think it's so unique to what you do, what you're selling, price point. So for example, I've expanded my products to have, just like a little grab and go station at checkout with a bunch of stickers that I've designed because stickers are really popular now. But a sticker is, $4 versus, somebody's sign, a hand carved wooden sign that could be $100. So, you're not going to bring as many of those. I might have 50 of the same sticker design. So I think it's just kind of guessing, kind of using your best judgment, right? And then I think over time you get to know, what sells, how much sells. I know I keep spreadsheets now. I've gotten better as I've done markets of like how many, mini jars of Play-Doh I sold at last year's holiday market and let me prep that many for this year and then maybe a few extra or whatever. Cuz there have been times where I've had it both ways. I have had sellout market days where I've sold out and I've had people be like, "But I want to get stuff." And I'm like, "Oh no, I didn't bring enough." And then I've had days where I have tons of stuff left over. And it's again, there's so many factors, but I think just tracking it the best you can and just using your best judgment.
I feel like it also depends. I mean, yes, it obviously depends on what you sell, but I think you can sort of match your booth to what you're selling as well. So it doesn't look, maybe you have a big U-shaped 3 tables, but if you're selling small products, then you're going to have like all this empty space. So it might be better to really focus on one really good looking table, to have your stuff with the height and the branding and all the things we talked about, versus trying to fill 3 tables, worth of stuff when you just don't know. So you can also design your booth to kind of figure out, like I don't want to make a bajillion things. I want to make, a handful of things. Then you could design your booth around how many things you have and make that look the best it can look versus, trying to fill like a huge booth or something like that.
And I feel like we touched on networking. Maybe like hunt out people that did it last year. Just ask them, what was the foot traffic like? How many people did you get through your booth? And that might give you a better idea of like at least how many people are walking through. That doesn't mean their purchases, but at least what the foot traffic is.
Yeah.
All right, another tough one. What is the best way to get started on a limited budget, especially since so many people are doing the same thing?
Oh gosh, that is a tough one.
Putting you on the spot.
Ah. um, I don't know. I mean, again, I think that's going to come down to your inventory and how much you're really wanting to put into it, how much you're wanting to bring with you. You know, are you like I have things like stickers now, right? That I can get manufactured for me that I've designed. So that's less of my time, but then it might cost a little bit more money than if I were printing my own stickers. So things like that, that cost that analysis that you have to do. But I think really just making sure that you're not, I don't know, like staying within your where you are, right? Like don't go and sign up for the $300 for one day booth. Maybe try to find something that's more like $30 to $50 if you can in your area. I think just keeping it realistic and don't feel like you have to go and um, make yourself broke in order to start. I mean, in any stage of small business, I know for the first outdoor market that I did, I borrowed a tent. I didn't even invest in my own tent, I think, until like the second or third market. I asked around my neighborhood group and I just asked, hey, does anybody have a pop-up tent I can use? Because that's another, pretty expensive investment. So I think finding, people who will lend you a 6-foot table or the things that you need without you going and, having to put all your money up front until you kind of figure out if this is really for you and your business.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this a lot, but finding that customer, finding your avatar, finding the person you're really selling to, and making unique products. I mean, there are so many people selling, like I went to a craft fair recently, and there were probably 4 different vendors selling sublimation tumblers because they're easy to make, they're really popular, and every booth looked the same, and each of them had like 100 tumblers. And I'm like, I'm just not going to go sit there and sort through all of those tumblers. And they just were, you know, it just there was no particular customer other than people who drink water, which is all of us. So I feel like really kind of, Crystal was talking about, she's like, my goal is to speak to parents of young kids. And so she has products that speak to parents of young kids. And so once you start to get that avatar down, you won't be part of the same people doing the same thing. You'll have your own unique booth.
All right, I'm going to touch on this one just a minute. So, going back to taxes, if you paid sales tax when you bought your supplies prior to getting a resale certificate, do you still have to collect sales tax? So, first of all, of course, we are not accountants, we are not lawyers. However, I want to encourage you not to be scared of sales tax. Your state sales tax organization is probably very friendly. I've talked to the one in Tennessee, I've talked to some of the ones in other states, and they're very friendly and very helpful. So you can call them, ask your questions. Tennessee has webinars and you can like watch those at any time, like past ones are recorded. It really isn't that complicated, and I don't want you to be scared, first of all. And then second of all, resale certificate is something you purchase so you don't have to pay sale, or not something you purchase, gosh, something you get so you don't have to pay sales tax on what you purchase to make your items. That is different from collecting sales tax of those things that you're selling. So those are 2 completely different things, and they have nothing to do with each other. So whether or not you pay sales tax on what you purchased to make your items has nothing to do whether the fact that you have to collect sales tax on the items you sell.
Yeah, so we are big fans of getting a reseller license. In most states, it's either free or is a small fee, and that means that you can buy the supplies you need to make your products at wholesale pricing, and you don't pay sales tax. So you can go to companies and buy basically directly from the manufacturer through like the first step of a middleman versus like 7 middlemen later when it gets to Michael's or whatever. That way, you are spending a lot less on the products that you're making.
Okay.
Thank you for taking the hard question, Angie.
Yes, I got it. Okay, this is a good one. So super simple way to track inventory besides Square or an app to track inventory. So any like inventory tips and tricks.
So I don't know of an app per se. Again, so my website is hosted on Shopify and Shopify tracks the inventory for me. But for craft fairs, I have created a Google document and I just literally have a tab for each fair or market. and the date, and then that way I can reference back, and then I'll just say how many items the types of items I brought, how many of each, what sold, how many I had left. So basically just a spreadsheet, unless you guys know of any app. I kind of do it old school.
I feel like I
I
do so much
don't.
old school. I made a spreadsheet earlier to send to you guys about this podcast. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
just I
Yeah.
am very much a very, like, old school spreadsheet kinda girl.
Google Docs is free. That's all I have to say. Okay, we have a time for maybe a couple more questions. This one is, how do you decide how much help to bring? So if you need help, how do you decide that and how much to bring?
So my help has always been my friend, like I mentioned before, my friend Jess. She has her own small business as well, and we kind of support each other, and we're there to help each other in the booth as needed. I know people who bring their significant other, their partner, a friend. Um, I think it just is going to depend on your item and what you're doing. Are you going to be personalizing on the spot, right? Because if I had my Glowforge machine at an event and I were able to do that, then I would hopefully have somebody taking the orders for me so that I can then be running the technical part of the machine, or vice versa. I would get somebody trained on running the machine so that I can, interact with the people purchasing. I think it's just really going to come down to you and your business and what you're selling.
I think you should always, at least, even if it's chatting with the person in the booth next to you, you should always have somebody that can take over, because there's no chance you're not going to need to go to the bathroom during an 8-hour craft fair, right? Like, you will have to go to the bathroom. You will probably want to grab some food, those sorts of things. So even if you don't have somebody to help with you, chat up the person in the booth next to you. Like, the lady at the booth next to me last time was making these incredibly cute hand embroidered towels. They were so cute. Anyway, I bought a bunch. They were adorable. But anytime I needed to go to the bathroom, she's like, "Go." And she would we learned what each other's stuff was, so we could actually sell each other's stuff. Basically, I was like, "These are hand embroidered towels, and they are $15 each," or whatever they were. And I feel like that worked really well to just, and you make a friend as well.
Exactly. And people will wait. Like they're not, I mean, that happens even I've been alone at, events, and I'll come back and the people are standing there and they're like, "Oh, they want to buy whatever, but I didn't know, I didn't know how much it was, or I didn't have your square." And people will wait. I mean, I think most people are just there to browse and have a good time.
So I feel like this one relates to that. It's, if you personalize and you're busy, how do you still sell if you're alone? So I would say, if you're going to personalize on site, I've seen people like bring someone else. So they have, they're personalizing, someone else is like handling customers, getting money, that type of thing. So I would say that perhaps if you're going to personalize, you might want like to tag team a booth. That's my opinion. Like, it might be helpful, like your husband, just someone to like help out with the booth itself.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be doing anything that's going to take your attention away from your customer, you should probably have two people.
Yeah. Okay, I think that is most of the questions. Just wanted to remind people about the Square code. So Crystal's Square code, you get up to $1,000 of processing for free. We have that in the YouTube description as well as the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a little QR code you can scan. So be sure to scan that, get that $1,000. And then we just want to thank Crystal for coming on. So be sure to follow Crystal on social media. It's Life Love Creations. And I would say, what's your top social channel, Crystal?
Definitely Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
So follow her on
And can
Instagram.
I add one more thing just about the
Yes.
Square? Just so people don't get confused. It's not $1,000 of processing fees. It's up to $1,000 of sales. So you'll save the percentage of processing fees. I just didn't want anybody to get upset with me if I did not save them $1,000. But it is still significant, especially if you're starting out. It's a great way to get, I mean, literally free processing, probably for your first market, depending how much you sell.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I also want to remind everybody, if you liked this episode, if you liked this podcast, we would really appreciate that you go on your favorite podcast network and rate and review our podcast. This gets us shown in more of the feeds and that sort of thing. So we would really love it if you could take just 5 minutes to do that for us. That would be your gift to us. And we would just really appreciate it.
And then in 2 weeks, if you want to join us live, we're doing a Q&A. So it's a Corey and Angie Ask Us Anything. So if you want to ask us all those things about your craft business, there is, and just Corey and Angie, just personal questions. We might answer some of those. There is a link in the show notes or the YouTube description to a form. Fill that out. Ask us questions. We will be answering all those things and, answering all the things that those burning questions you have about us. All right. So be sure to rate the show and we will see you in 2 weeks. So thank you all for joining.